Okay, hello everyone, good evening.
Good evening.
So in this week's Parsha, the Pasuk teaches us, Lo sisnas achicha bilvavecha, you shall not hate your brother in your heart. We're commanded not to hate anybody, and the question is that this seems to somewhat contradict another verse in a different Parsha of Mishpatim, which says, Kisira chamor seinecha rovitz tachas masai v'chadalta me'azav lei azav tazav imai. If you see the donkey of someone you hate crouching under its burden, would you refrain from helping him? You shall surely help him. And the question is, who is this person that you hate who's traveling and his donkey is saddled down and is struggling, and now the Torah is teaching us to go ahead and help him? I thought we're not supposed to hate anybody. By telling us not that we should help somebody we hate, the Torah seems to be somewhat passively acknowledging or allowing the existence of somebody that we hate. So who is this person? So the Gemara, the Talmud in Psachim addresses this, and he says that this person who someone is allowed to hate is a specific type of person who knows right from wrong and knows what he should and shouldn't do in the world, and yet he goes out of his way to intentionally desecrate and disgrace the name of Hashem. And he goes out and he tries to encourage people to be further from Hashem. And he's a wicked person whose acts are clearly very intentional. And this is the type of person that could fall in the category of somebody that we can hate. So this is this fella who's struggling with the donkey. And I still don't understand, it still doesn't seem so clear what the Torah's policy is on hatred. If there are some people that there is some kind of allowance to hate, so then the pasuk, when it says that you shouldn't hate anybody, it should say, a little star and an asterisk on the bottom and say restrictions apply. There are some people that are wicked enough that maybe we could hate. It seems to be a blanket statement. So I think the idea is, if we look at the pasuk, it says, "Sisnas achicha bilvavecha." We should not hate our brother in our heart, and that's the key to this prohibition against hating people, is not to hate someone in a personal manner. There's definitely evil out there in the world. There are things that contradict our values, and nobody's going to tell you there aren't bad things in the world that we shouldn't despise. But once that hatred becomes personal and it's something that you feel in your heart, so that's crossing a line already, and that's something that we should never have that kind of feeling on. So we're feeling maybe on a more of a surface level that we don't like bad actions, we don't like evil in the world, but not that we have a deep and personal hatred towards specific people. So the question is, so Tosfos, and this Gemara, Tosfos tells us that this is a very risky position to be in. If we have some kind of hatred, and now we got to find that balance. Okay, we don't like evil, but we don't hate people, or we don't have this personal hatred of people. We have to realize that we're playing with fire, because it's a very fine line between when at some point this becomes personal and now we're transgressing the Torah prohibition against hating someone. So it says you have to be really careful about this. And he brings a scenario. He says, what happens if you're traveling and you see two donkeys? And one is somebody that you hate and one is somebody that you love. And they're both struggling and they both need help. Tosfos says you should go and help the donkey of your enemy first before going to your friend or the person you like. And that seems to be a pretty strong statement. It's not an act of evil to help the person that you love first. There's two people. Only one of them can be helped first. So the idea of helping the one that you hate first doesn't seem to me to be such a bad idea. It's not like a terrible act of hatred. So I think the idea here is, and Tosfos explains this somewhat, he says that it's very, also again, risky to do anything that might bring out the hatred in you in a more personal way. So he said, let's walk this through. You have these two people, they're both struggling, and you go help the one you like first. There's a risk that during that interaction, you had told, or left your enemy alone, and you didn't help him first, and that may make you, maybe even subconsciously, feel that hatred in a more personal manner. So you can't even do an action that has a low risk of you feeling that hatred as something more personal. And that's why you have to go ahead and help the one that you hate first. And I think with this understanding, it makes the reading of this pasuk even better when we look at the rest of the pasuk. After the Torah teaches us not to hate our friend, it says, you shall reprove your fellow. The Torah teaches us that if we see somebody struggling, we see somebody do a sin or some kinds of transgression, we should reprove him and we should help him and tell him what he did and how he can improve. And I think the idea that these are in the same exact verse is very intentional, because if the Torah first told us not to hate someone, and we're saying this means in this kind of personal hate, and now the Torah is telling, and now you should help someone who stumbled or who sinned to improve his ways. That also should be done in a way that's not personal. It's not from a position of hatred. It's not that you don't like this person, he did something terrible, and now you're going to go and bash him for it or scream at him for it, but rather it's coming from a position of love, not from personal hatred. And that's what the Torah is telling us we should do. And I think it's certain that this kind of helping out our fellow Jew is also going to go much further and much more likely to be successful. We all know if somebody is doing something wrong and somebody comes and yells us at it, and he's just yelling at us, and you could tell that he's mad or that he hates us, how likely are we to actually go ahead and improve our ways because of that, versus someone who can clearly show that he has love for you and a compassion for you and he's doing this for your benefit? That's something that's much easier to accept. I heard a story this week about the big Rebbe, Reb Shayel of Karastir. His yahrzeit was a couple of weeks ago. He died in 1925 in Hungary, and he was a very well-known Hasidic Rebbe. A lot of amazing stories about him, and this is one of them. And his Gabbai, I wasn't sure if it was his Gabbai or just somebody, his assistant or somebody hanging around in his house, decided that he wants to see what goes on behind the scenes in the Rebbe's office. People come, all kinds of Jews are coming in there and telling him about their troubles and sorrows, and miraculously he somehow ensures a happy ending to so many stories. So he decided he's going to spy on the Rebbe. And he made a little hole in the wall or a hole in the curtain that was in his office, and he stood there when people were coming, and he watched. And this is what he heard. A man comes in and he sits before him and he starts crying to the Rebbe, and he tells him his situation is terrible. He had no children, he had no money, he was in terrible health, and he was just all around totally depressed, and came to the Rebbe for help. And he told the Rebbe, I'm really done. This is too much for me. I can't handle this anymore. I'm ready to take my own life. I don't think there's anything I can do in this world to improve my situation. And the Rebbe hears him out, and he says, okay, you came to the right place. Let's plan this. How are you going to end your life? And he says, there's a bridge in Karastir overlooking a river. I was thinking to go onto the bridge and jump off the bridge. And the Rebbe says, excellent, that's an excellent idea. That's a great plan, but I just want to warn you that there's a risk in this plan, because the bridge is not altogether that high, and there's a chance you'll survive. And if you survive that fall, you're going to be in terrible pain for the rest of your life. It's not worth it. Let's think of something else. So they're talking, they have an idea. There's a building in Karastir that's a pretty tall building. Maybe he'll jump off that building. And the Rebbe says, great idea, but it's a very tall building, and in this case he thinks it's too tall, and when a person jumps off such a high building, the mess that he's going to make of the way his body will get destroyed is very gruesome. And he said it's undeserving of a man of your honor to end your life in such a manner where your body is going to be so, taken apart in that manner. That's not a good plan either. So they talk it out, and they're trying to think of more ideas, and everyone, the Rebbe has some kind of reason why it's just not going to work. It's just not a good suicide plan. And finally the Rebbe says, listen, we don't have a good plan, but you can only do this if you're going to do it properly. Give me 2 weeks to think about it. Come back to me in 2 weeks, and hopefully by then I'll have a proper plan how you're going to end your life, and we'll take it from there. And the man left, and he never came back. Now, what's the idea behind this story? Reb Shayel did not scream at this man. There's many different ways somebody could react if somebody would come into a Rebbe and say such a thing. what are you doing? How could you do that? Life is important. It's such a terrible thing. Judaism, frowns on that. All kinds of reasons you can scream at a person why that's a terrible thing to do. But would that work? I don't know, but maybe not. But that person will feel like the Rebbe does not really understand the pain that he's going through. Reb Shaila felt the pain of this Jew and showed that he felt the pain of this Jew and that he loved him and that he was here to try to have the best possible resolution to this. And maybe from that alone, the person realized that there are people out there who care about him and that there is something in life that's worth living. So I think this story of Reb Shaila illustrates this idea very well. Even if we're rebuking someone, we're encouraging someone, we should do it from a position where we feel where he's coming from and we're doing it out of love and not out of hatred or anger.